And there's the look we're trying to simulate on the nose of this ship. Those big giant griffin blisters, the exhaust, and the spinner. Hey, there's a lot of neat little details coming up on this plane as we get into it. Anyway, this is tape 2, the Seafire construction series. There's so many Seafire development variations, and luckily we have most of them documented, so it's only a question of picking and choosing here. And for anybody not really involved in or the Seafire Spitfire phenomenon, I'll call it, it's a very interesting plane to model. The Seafire Spitfire has almost every conceivable variation of spinner, nose, blisters, rudders, canopies, and we plan to really mix and match and come up with what we hope is going to be the ultimate fantasy Seafire. But it's all an adventure, and we're working at it one step at a time, little by little by little. We plan on spending the next 6 or 8 months researching and building this, and we hope it's really going to be a winner. Okay, on to the shop. Now, in the last tape, we finished up the fuse sides. The epoxy's been drying overnight, which is really a good idea, by the way. Let it harden up. And Don Patterson's going to stop by today for a little maintenance work on his pattern master, so we'll take care of his stuff first before we even get back to working on this. There's no point starting. He's going to be here in a few minutes. Again, if you're going to leave this, a good tip is just leave it sit with the weights on it and everything. It'll definitely take a set better this way than if you rush, pop it open, and just leave it laying flat on a table. The longer you can leave it under compression, the better. Okay, we're trying to buff out a little bit of Don Patterson's plane here. And we're going to obviously spend some time masking this canopy off, putting some detail work in it. This is paint that's now about 6 or 8 months old, so it's really easy to get it to come up. Good old Gorhams. A little bit of Gorhams, a little bit of 1200, comes right up. We want to add one color of trim here, so I'm trying to mask this off. This is a really small little detail thing, but I thought it'd be worthwhile putting it on the tape. And the point here is you can always, even after a model, in this case, this model's over a year old, you can always add some detail to it. Okay, you happy with that basic outline shape?
That's it. That's what we're looking for.
Okay, we just got to mask it off now.
Well, you're getting...
Okay, this is ready to spray, and the only problem is neither one of us can decide what color we want to make this outline. What do you think, Don? Come on. Come on, you're the talented one here. Not really talented.
Not really.
Not really. In fact, totally untalented would be a more accurate description.
Boiple's a good color.
The Boiple's a good color. All right, let's go to the video. Let's go find some paint. Yeah, memories of your plane being painted. Yeah, you gotta move the car. You can do that now and then we'll cut the line. All right, Now we got an exceptionally nice day out here. The guy next door is chopping trees down in the storm. He's got a mess in his backyard, so do I. I had to put a net over the pond. The leaves are getting in the pond. We're trying to put a little tweak in a fuselage. Now what I did, I cut a little hole in the back of the fuselage on the bottom, sprayed some Windex up into the body, and I got some clay out on the tail to try to tweak it back to where we want to have it, where neutral would be. So let the first coat dry while they chip. Boy, is that chipper going there? That's the macho chipper. Well, we took advantage of having some halfway decent weather here to do this. You wanted to add some details. In the future, we're going to add some more paint work to this, but being this paint has been sitting for so long, it's probably ready to buff out in a minute. The canopy buffed out almost instantly, so we'll let this dry a couple hours, pull the tape off, and get back to working on that Seafire.
Just enough.
Okay, and you got all your lines in a box and everything?
Yep, we're all done.
Now after these have dried overnight, I guess I put on the video already, I get all the edges trued to the plywood so I have a complete edge going right around. An easy way to do this, if you don't have a big sanding block, is put spray cement on a glass table and glue down some like 220 sandpaper. But I like to get those edges really trued up, then I want to put the carbon fiber on and the little stringers. It just takes a couple of swipes of the sandpaper, but if you don't get it, it's kind of a little bit of a sloppy way to build. Now I don't know if you can sight down these, but that really came out to be a nice true edge. Now to maintain that edge, I'm going to run that, well, from here back, a piece of carbon fiber and a stringer. And that does a super job of maintaining that edge. You can see, maybe you can even see this up close, I don't know. I only have about an hour here to do this. We're going out to put some more bricks out by the patio, the last load of bricks I have to pick up today, so whatever time I get, I want to show this up close. Now, getting these edges nice, then what I do is I take each one, once I get that half sealed, and just run the CA right down the edge, even the edge of the plywood, and that keeps it from delaminating in time. Let some of it soak in, let it sit for a minute or so. Q-tips. I go around each edge. Now, of course, I'll true up the airfoil. Then I'll take all four of them together, marry them up together, make sure they're all exactly identical. Little details like this. Remember the old thing, the devil's in the details. These little details. When you see somebody who has, let's say, a typical plane and it's about 10 ounces too heavy, you wonder how many little details they could have done that just would have made it a little bit, yeah, maybe took a little bit longer to build it, but you wouldn't have all these little overweight things that just go along for the ride. You know, when you're doing a square 8, the last thing you need is to be carrying around some luggage. All these edges and the edge here. Now we're going to taper that back, of course, to get rid of the stressorizer, but right now, just getting everything sealed up. I'll get this edge with the Dremel tool. I can see that I have just a little bit extra plywood. Trim that all off. I want to get these perfect and then get all four of them put together and make a mirror image out of them. And once the CA kicks, if you hit it again, it'll make really like a hard edge even on a balsa wood. And getting these edges all hardened up with CA is another nice little tip you can use no matter what plane you're building. Now I see I've gone through all the high spots, so I'll just get another bead of CA on here. Eventually I have what looks like, it almost looks like it has a clear finish on the wood, but what it's telling me is that CA is totally soaked in, and I'll have real good integrity here. And all I'm really going to get done today is just to true these up, and I'll do the other ones off camera. And then the last thing is I want to get, again, a little bit of sanding on this edge. One of the things I like to do is during the course of building, I like to keep the model as, you know, at least sanded, even on the parts you don't even see, just because it's nicer to work on, more convenient, a little extra time. See, like this, I'll get a better joint when this is flat. And on a day like today, even though I only have roughly an hour to work on this, it's an hour that, you know, I'll be 1 hour ahead, let's say tomorrow or the next day, when I really get to work on this for a good sized session. All right, that's one side, and a little bit of extra work right up here up front. In fact, I see a little more I could do up here. And really, even if you can sneak away for even a short amount of time sometimes, like I'm doing now, you get a little bit ahead, and you feel good about it. Okay, that's one. I'll do the rest off camera, and we probably won't be back in the shop till tomorrow. What I'm doing, I'm putting a taper. We don't want the plywood to end at a step. I want it to be a smooth transition, so I'm taking a Dremel drum. Now, if you've ever seen a plane where right where the doubler ends there's a crack in the paint, it's because you have a stress riser where the plywood ends. The plywood ends and the balsa begins, so we want to try to transition this into a smooth transition. At no spot does the doubler end and the fuse side begin, so I'm trying to make a nice blend on this. Let me look at this from the top. Let's see if this... See, at no point do you have a step. A step is always where there's a stress riser. By blending it right in, and I'll do all the other sides off camera. In fact, that's probably all I'm going to get to do today. And I've got all these edges sealed up nice. Anytime I can just get an hour of work in here, it's such a big help, because then the next day, I always feel like I'm just a little bit ahead. And each one of these joints now I seal with CA, and I just want to let it sit here. I'm not even going to kick it off. I'm taking each joint, going onto the plywood about 1 inch and back out onto the fuse side 1 inch, so that I don't have a spot where it's even a tapered plywood end. I really want to kill that stress riser. That's a big help toward killing vibration and getting rid of stress cracks. And if you notice the Spitfire or Strega or any of the modern planes, no stress cracks anywhere, and this is one of the reasons why. Now I'm trying to take advantage of the fact that I have about an hour every morning to work on this stuff before we go out and do our normal day's work. I want to get that, this has actually been sitting here overnight again, and what I want to do is, before these parts get the humidity from the cellar in spring, I want to get my carbon toe in. Now, if you need to know, if you want to buy a roll of this carbon toe, this is about a $250 roll. So if you only need to make one fuselage, call me up and I'll send you some for nothing. No problem. It's silly to pay $250. This is probably one of the only places we use this for, and it's not available, as far as I know, in real tiny quantities that are reasonable. So what I do, the first thing is cut up all the pieces ahead of time. I want to C8 them right in position and then make those little stringers that go on here. Show that up. Now the best way to get a nice joint on this, that I've found, is first roughly block sand out the area where you want to put the toe. And again, we want to go right up onto the plywood doubler. We don't want to make a joint where there's no strength. Block sand out and leave the dust on. It's the dust that'll kick the CA at a nice slow rate so we don't wind up with a real sloppy, well, trying to use kicker here is not appropriate. I don't want this to kick off. What I want to do, if I possibly can, is get the dust to kick it off. Kicks it off nice and slow. Now, I cut the pieces already to size. We'll try to show this. This toe has a twist in it, so you have to get it laid out flat. And from that point on, I want to go right up over the doubler. Get it locked right in. Now, carbon has the best strength when it's laminated right in between two pieces of wood. For what we're doing, if you just leave it right out on the surface and don't confine it some way, well, let's let that kick. But it isn't as strong as it could be. When it's laminated in between two pieces of wood, that confines it and it makes a super strong joint. Now with one edge attached, now I have to kind of just take the twists out of this and go about 1.5 inches at a time. And a good way to press it down is with the bottom of the tube, since the glue doesn't stick to the tube. That flattens it out relatively well. And you got to go slow. First time you do this, you'll probably glue your hand right to the carbon toe, which I've done enough times. Probably do it again today. And you'll see it kind of threads out and gets delaminated. Doesn't mean anything, because we're going to cover this with a little stringer. This adds, it does two things. It adds a lot of strength, and because we're using molded shells, really that's about as light as you can make a piece reasonably. So I don't want to try to make a plane that's the lightest plane in the world and then it breaks. That's one thing. Number two, this adds so much rigidity, flying strength, that once we put those X members in the body, once the tail is in and you put the X members in, it's unbelievable how strong it is. The Spitfire is a good example of a plane that's, see, making a plane that's real light is like a monkey can do that. Making a plane that's real strong, a monkey can do that, it'll probably be too heavy. The whole key to success is to make it strong and light at the same time, and that requires a little bit of thought. That requires somebody like Jim Greenaway that's very, very, I don't know, whatever the right word is. He seldom gets the thing wrong. And it may seem like some of the stuff we do is overkill and over-engineering, like putting these pieces in, but 10 years from now, after 14,000 outside round loops, you'll be glad that these pieces were in the plane. And I'm only going to show one on camera. The rest are all redundant. I just go end to end. And also the biggest thing is, all during the construction phase, this keeps the wood from springing. Now, we spent an awful lot of time to make 2 fuse sides. A lot of people probably are thinking, oh man, I make fuse sides in a half an hour. Well, I don't. Fuse sides are a real important part of what's going to happen to this plane. Just like a wing spar, a fuse side, this fuse side is going to carry all the torque loads of the whole airplane as it tries to twist and bend. So getting it light and strong, we didn't even glue it to the table. Okay, now we're going to flip it around. You see we've got, it's relatively straight now. I don't know if you can really sight this. Relatively, but we want to keep it straight. That's the whole thing. So I'll do the rest of these all off camera. Now the last thing I'm going to have time for in this session is just to get these pieces. I'm not even going to have time to do the stringers. But see, I always suggest to people, and this is another thing, several people have, in the course of having a really intimate conversation, said, gee whiz, I never have any time to work on my model. I never seem to get anything built. Well, see what I do, I come down here early in the morning like this, try to squeeze in an hour or so, even on a day that I have to do, normal work, construction work or machine shop work. And I'll get home tonight, maybe I'll even get another hour in. You never know. Depends on how much stuff we have to do today. But allocating that time is so important. Otherwise, you just never get anything done. It takes a year to build a plane. Now, with that carbon fiber sanded out, everything's nice and smooth. I got all 4 of them done. The next time I get a chance to work on this, I'll get that little balsa cap strip in there, and what we have is I have the piece of the fuselage side that's left over, which is good sea grain. I'll get each one with a little cap with a triangulation in it. So actually now this is really, well, a significant thing. I'm now 1 hour ahead of where I would be if we get a, by the way, the Yankees are ahead 3-2. Eat your heart out, Atlanta. They'll probably lose tonight. And I could have had tickets to the game. Believe me, you don't want to hear the story. I could have had tickets to tonight's game. Anyway, significant thing. Always get a little bit done. And it's always better to get little sessions in where you can get little stuff taken care of. That's why it's so important not to put things off and try to wait for Saturday or Sunday. Yeah, if we get a nice session, I'm this much ahead of the game. I've got all this little stuff. I've got sides and I'm ready to go. I'm ready to start making fuselages. But if you wait till Saturday to start making a crutch or the fuse side, know what I'm going to do when I get to the next time I get to work on this. I'm going to strip down. These are the pieces that we took off to even out the fuse side. And I noticed they're nice straight C grain, so we're going to make our little strips for that. But we're not going to get to do much else today. But one of the little thoughts to always remember here is we're going to get that steam train ride in this weekend, I hope. My wife and I are really looking forward to a day away from working on construction work and this stuff. But I'm really starting to see about at this point in time it becomes aeroplanes. It is in parts, it makes that transition into airplanes. And now I can clearly see in my mind, you know, some things where this plane will not have the Spitfire top block. But these little things, even though this took actually took an hour to do all 4 pieces, it took time to do this. This allows us to use shells. The shells that are going to go on these models, I anticipate being less than 10 grams each when they're sanded out. And normally the blocks run in the 24 to 28 gram range. Midgley had one that was down to about 19, but that's about the lightest one I've ever seen. So the shells and that little carbon make for a good way to build. That's one thing to keep in mind no matter what you're building. If you can use molded shells and those carbon strips, I think you're going to have a real light model. And it's that thing that's hard to do. Light and stiff and strong at the same time and vibration resistant. And that's what we managed to accomplish with the Spitfire. What we managed to accomplish with it was that not only was it light, it was strong, it had a motor run, and there's no cracks in the paint. And that's what we're striving for during this whole Seafire thing. Now in today's mail, these are pictures that just came in from Robert Ray. If you go back with us long enough into last year's video series, The Spitfire, you'll know Robert Ray was building profiles, and maybe with or without not the greatest finish in the world, I'm not really sure, but he sent in these real nice photos, and I'll pass these on to Stunt News, needless to say. And he basically wrote me a nice letter saying he learned everything he knows about good finishing from me. Well, yeah, Bob, I appreciate it a lot, but the pizzas taste good when you're here too. Anyway, sharing this stuff is really what makes this just a lot of fun, I guess, is the bottom line. And this looks like an excellent finish. Bob, I'll pass them on to Stunt News. Thanks a lot, and hey, I hope this sucker flies for you. Looks like a nice design. Robert Ray. Now, as we've done the last 3 Saturdays in a row, we try to catch the steam engine as it goes by. We've been scoping out different spots. This is right by Jeff Stifel's old apartment, in fact. I got this for people that are new to the Seafire thing. I try to put in some interesting little tidbits of the rest of my life, so it becomes more than just let's cut balsa wood. But anyway, there's a steam engine. It's number 614. It's going to be coming by here in about 10 minutes. And one of the things, it's the last of the Erie Big Berkshires. And to me, it's an exciting thing, and I know to a lot of people around this way, because when we were kids, this is what we used to do, is sit on the railroad track, tape pennies to the railroad track, and whatever. And of course, tomorrow, Karen and I will be on this train excursion. It's tomorrow, and the weather is supposed to be in the 70s, beautiful. The leaves are in their maximum yellow and orange foliage, so we're really looking forward to this. Now I can see George coming down here. I scoped out a spot that's big signs that say no trespassing, but too bad. I'm just using this to focus in on the camera. The next train through should be the steam engine. Pretty active part of the railway here. And I just want to see if this is going to be a good location. See the signal lights are flashing on and off. I gotta tell you, I'm really looking forward to this. Karen and I have been on many steam train rides. It's one of the things we really enjoy. And if you have any footage of your expeditions, hey, send them in. We'll swap you with ours. Anybody that's interested, if you send me a little note or something, I'll send you a whole, I'm going to shoot video, of course, but I'm not going to put the whole thing on tape of this steam train ride. It's a lot of fun. All right, the next train through should be number 614, the last of the big Erie Berkshires. And this will be the last day we get to shoot it. Look, all right, George? You got a good angle here? Right around the curve. We took about a mile walk down here. Oh, the life of a professional train chaser. Anyway, I have enjoyed doing this. It's been an exciting way to wake up every Saturday morning and run over here. This is the lead engine, and what they do the first time they ran this is a 10.5-hour excursion, and what they did, they ran out of coal. They used 30 tons of coal on this run. So what they did, they have a double diesel headed up, get out in front of it just in case, I guess. I'm just using this so I can focus in and get a little better angle here. See when I start to have to hit this. Here comes another train the other way anyway. The double diesel. All right, we're ready. I won't do any talking on a run by so you can hear the sound. If you could only get the smell to come out on video too, the smell of the coal. smell. Oh my God. Better than butyrate dope. You get any good pictures, Mickey Mouse?
Got to load my camera.
At least I got video. Hey, look at this guy. Oh my God.
I didn't crank in the...
We're back from that steam ride, and boy, it was unbelievable. Anyway, I got the book. It's somewhere in a future video. I'll put some of the really nostalgic pictures and information on this. In the meantime, what I decided to do, I shot video on the whole trip, and I'm going to put together a nice little package. Anybody out there that's a rail fan or interested in steam engines or steam rides or just trains in general, all you got to do is let me know. The tape is free. Remember that word, free. All you have to do is when you're done watching it, return it. And the people I know that subscribe to the tapes and are interested in trains, of which there are many, I'll send that out without them even asking. But if you're interested and I'm not aware of it, let me know and I'll share this trip with you. It was a lot of fun. It was a good day. Now we can get back to working on that Seafire. I'm ready. Now these extra, the little piece that we stripped off the fuse size makes an excellent piece. What I'm going to do is strip off 8 of these pieces, get them C8 into position, and then double check and triple check that I've got all totally straight fuse sides, and make sure they're perfect mirror images of each other. And I can't emphasize enough, this is where people get in trouble. They want to lighten up a plane, and of course everybody wants to lighten it up. So what they do is they drill holes in bell cranks and the bell cranks break. They drill holes in the motor mounts and the motor vibrates. Or they try engineering something up and they're not really an engineer. Well, you know, neither am I. I just do this and kind of learn as I go. But the bottom line is you can make a very rigid, very straight, and very light fuse side, but it takes a little more labor. It takes figuring out where the stress risers are, how can you lighten this up? The carbon will keep it from springing, it'll strengthen it, and it'll allow us to use shells that are about an ounce lighter than carved blocks. So this is all worthwhile engineering. I've never done one of these where I used shells and didn't have the carbon, so I don't know, maybe you could even go that far, but the carbon only adds a gram or 2 per side, so why take a chance? And I know carbon has one characteristic: it does not give or stretch at all, so it'll make this a much more rigid fuselage, and it'll keep the weight down. We're looking for between 10 and 12 ounces for the completed fuselages. Now you can even see some of the pieces that you strip off, some of them tend to go whoop, and just look at how some of the wood springs. So you're always looking for wood that's perfectly straight even after you cut it. And that's the whole idea of doing. I just emphasize over and over again, I have seen so many people build a beautiful plane, and when it's all done, they go to pull out of the wing over, the tail is a little up, the plane will come out. When you see a plane coming out of a wing over, and you know somewhere in there something is not right. Now as I'm gluing this along the edge, I'm trying to really make sure it's perfect on the edge here. Just go down a couple inches at a time and tack it on. Run that strip right down. And what's good here is get a little sanding dust on here. Just rub the sandpaper on the inside. Let the dust sit. This gives you a little time to work with the CA. It doesn't kick off super instantly then. And it tends to keep it from sticking to your hand, which I've already stuck my hand to this once already. You want to keep a nice parallel edge, and then we'll work this edge. Make sure we're not even off by the thickness of a piece of paper here. Such a critical thing. It's easy to overlook it. It's easy to just rush on to the next step, or you know, you put all the time into doing a plane like this. Getting this alignment part of it is just so important. And what I'm trying to do is just turn this edge piece into a triangular piece. Again, what I'm looking for is the maximum strength with the minimum weight. Now, a plane seems to be a good way to get a big piece of it. And the rest I'll just get with the sanding block. And I just dress this edge off and we'll have a perfect triangle. Blend it in. You don't want any stress riser, no place where it distinctly starts or ends. You know, and a lot of this stuff, you may be looking at it and saying, oh, that's overkill, I don't need that. Yeah, well, when you come up with a plane that you wish was an ounce or two lighter and just as pretty or just as strong, you just can't go back, you know, 9 years later and say, gee, let me do that. Let me add that little detail. You got to add the details as you're building. You can't wait till the plane is finished. Now the final thing is I try to get all the extra glue off. And again, it may seem like a lot of overkill, it may seem like a lot of extra work, but when you finish and you have a plane that's a little bit lighter than you expected it to be and a lot stronger, it's always these little details, and you don't see this stuff written about in magazines. The guys that engineer a plane up in a little bit secretive way, well, yeah, maybe they keep it to themselves, I don't know, but it always seems like you get to the Nats and here's somebody's plane, it's just a little bit lighter, a little bit stronger. You wonder how they did it, and it doesn't seem to be information that's available over the counter, that's for sure. But it's in the details, and it might not be exactly this, but it's in the details. You can see the final shape, and the main thing is we have that carbon confined in wood. We have that perfectly true edge on both sides. And I'll make the rest of these up off camera. This just gets redundant. I have to make 3 more, and then we'll get back to the next step. Now a good double check, and I just always like to double check myself, is to use, this is one of those precision steel rulers. I want to make sure I don't have any gap anywhere, and this verifies that my table and my eye are working relatively well. I don't have any kind of a gap here, because I sure would hate to spend 200, 300, 400 hours putting this plane together and find out that one of the fuse sides went off to the left, then the tail tends to come out of alignment. Right now these pieces are locked in with carbon and with balsa wood. In fact, let's get a real close look up at the joint here. This is kind of a blended in joint, so we don't have any spot where this ends and begins, where there'll should be no stress riser in this at all. Now that I'm at this point, now I can use my T-square, let me get it off the table, and I can put on the outside of the fuse, I can scribe in all my center lines on all the fuse sides. On the second set, what I did, I had a little bit of a high spot, and usually you'll get a high spot right here. So what I do is, by pressing down right on the high spot, I'm using the sandpaper that's attached to the table, pressing right down on the high spot, and I can do this a little, go back, check it, go back, check it. Now again, this fuse side seems to have stayed totally stable. This one picked up a little tiny high spot. Now, I'm about a 60-foot, so now I'm trying to find a spot where it's rocking. And there'll always be what's called a hard spot. I'm right about here, right at the trailing edge. So right here is where I want to press down. Again, this is a lot like, this is one of the little tricks I learned when doing sheetrock work, is to always find a hard spot, find out where it's hard, and then get rid of it. I'm guessing I'll need one more shot on this. Sometimes you have to go back and forth a few times, but it's always easier to do it now than to live with a plane that doesn't have good alignment. Now you just have to keep picking up the hard spot. Sometimes you have to do this 3 or 4 times, but once you get to this point, even a couple of thousandths is important, because this will kill the alignment if I don't get this right now. I want to double verify that the lines that are on are perfect. Because if I remove some of the fuselage top, this line might be different. This one is okay. I'm still on a good center. Now this one, the line is on the other side, but it doesn't matter. I have it marked. And these alignment marks absolutely have to be perfect as far as you want to have that good neutral on everything. That'll help even in lining up the flap. Now it's starting to come together, but that's all we're going to get to do right now. We'll get back to this tonight after trying to make some real money here. Anyway, love that steam train. Never get sick of playing that footage. Alright, we'll pick this up on the next step. All the center lines are on. All the strapping is on. I call it strapping. It's all angleized, it's all sanded, and it's all trued up. So we're pretty much ready to start our assembly in the next session. Now today I'll get this crutch in this session. Pouring rain, so we really don't even have to go and work today. Now remember, I'm only going to be hitting this edge. So I want to make sure I get a line on there. Now this is one of the things I like to do. Whenever I'm doing hardwood with CA, and of course you could epoxy this, a little bit of baking soda. Rub it right into the hardwood. This gives you a real quick joint, and it also gives you enough working time. Problem with doing it without baking soda is sometimes it takes too long or it kicks off too quickly and you have a misalignment. I want to have a couple of seconds to get the alignment just right on this. I don't want to have it be that I drop this in and all of a sudden it's boom and it's done. Okay, another thing will help if you put a little bit of the CA, you put a little bit down in the refrigerator, cool it off just a little bit. Remember, this is a hardwood to hardwood joint. Not trying to make a real pretty joint here. I want to have one that's really bulletproof. I don't want to use thin CA. I want to use thick so it's gap filling. And I want it to give me a minute or so to correct any misalignment. Do that with my fingertips here. Okay. Now as it starts to set up, I can get a radius in the corner with a Q-tip. This I kind of work fast. Baking soda gives me about a minute to work with here. And I could still probably reposition this if I have to. If you do this with quick set and CA and you miss it, man, you eat the farm here. Now it's still just a little bit. I'm going to kick it. Now I know it's kind of tacked in position. Get every piece of this under pressure. And then the biggest thing you hope for now is that you haven't glued it to the table. Just a little bit. Okay. Now usually you get a little bit of a gap because we have a radius on both of these parts. I like to fill a gap with baking soda, just rub it in with my finger. Any little gap that's in there. Then I can just run some thin CA down here. I want to make sure one part is totally set up because this will then be my 90 degree to line up the other part. Hey, you see me do this from time to time with the paper towel. The trick is the dust in the paper towel combined with the baking soda gives you a nice slow kick. It doesn't form that popcorn-like crap that seems to ruin a lot of joints. Get a little bit of this down there. Once this kicks, dust it off. You can touch it with your finger now. Bingo. I just like to clean the joint off because I'm going to put this back down on the table. I want to maintain that. I don't want to have a bubble in this joint and everything's off. Just a little light dusting. All the fuses that have been built this way have had really good durability and really good motor runs. And they've all been in the 10 to 11 ounce range when they're finished. And after each step, you do a step like this, clear the table with, assuming you're using a glass table, clear off the little dots of CA, or you wind up with all little machine gun bullets through the plane, and they have to be filled with talc filler or whatever. It can't help. Now get ready to do the joining of the other side. Leave the dust on, take a little bit of baking soda, that'll help. Now, of course, you want to have the two fuses parallel on the table when you do this. And you want to have, the most important thing, a little bit of working time so you're not strangled for time and you have to rush and rush. This is slow jet, the yellow label. Now, a lot of times when you do this, you'll glue it right to the table, but you really can't, without holding it down nice and stiff, you're always going to have a problem. Now, before this even kicks. Okay. I'm just holding the both sides down on the table level. Okay, there it goes, starting to kick now. Now, a piece of brass tubing wrapped with that sticky sandpaper makes a good tool. We want to get the motor mounts as close to the edge here, a nice blended, sanded in seam. And of course this allows you to get both of them. I knock down the extra little points so the mount itself will mount right into the part of the wing that has the sheeting in the center and is double tissued. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to take the punkiest piece of 1/4 inch I have and make a 1/4 inch square tail post. I'll make enough for both of the fuses at once. You don't want to use a piece of 1/4 inch square that you buy because they usually use heavier wood to do that. This is really punk wood. This is a super punk piece. I'll save that, by the way. And I want to make a tail post out of this wood. Then I'll be able to bow the fuselage back together and we'll be ready to start laying out the formers. Now what I want to do, because I have those little triangle pieces in here, I want to allow for them. Now keep in mind, we're trying for a little more scale-like fuselage. This is wider than a Spitfire fuselage. This is not going to be interchangeable. We're going wider at the mounts, wider at the tail, so the whole fuselage will be roughly, I'm saying roughly a 1/4 inch wider. More scale-like appearance is what we're after here. Now the best idea here is just to tack it in position first and then check it. Woo. Sight down it. Obviously the two top and two bottom surfaces should be completely parallel. Let's see what this looks like if we can get this on the lens. Okay, that's what we're trying for. The perfect bow on both sides, and we've maintained that angle, maintained that alignment, a perfectly flat, true surface. May seem a little time consuming, but 10 years from now when you're flying your whatever and that thing pulls out of wing overs perfectly every time, you'll be happy. Now, one of the things that I realize is going to happen by doing this is I'm going to wind up with a thicker than the Spitfire rudder. And that's going to be to our advantage because in this case the Seafire has a much larger rudder and I want to move it less degrees of travel. So by making it thicker, I in effect get a soft neutral that'll probably I'll be able to work around and use to my advantage. Keep in mind, a thin rudder would be the most effective, and the thicker you make the rudder, the less and less the effective travel would be. So this may work if we can make get a real light piece of punk wood. We'll have the best of both worlds, the best of all worlds. We'll have that scale-like appearance and the amount of travel that we need within the linkage ratios that we already know work. Okay, now just to save tape, I'll do exactly the same thing to the other set of sides off camera. And then we'll get back to this when we have both of them in the completely framed mode like we have the first one. Now, before I can get into the final little alignment that I need to do, I need to make sure the whole table perfectly clean. I scraped it and Windexed it. I've done this before and not done a good job. In fact, here's one right here of cleaning a table, and it's really been a problem. So before I go on to the next step, I want this table perfectly clean. By the way, this is a good tip you can use on other projects beside doing this. Okay, both fuses are done. They're pretty much identical. Now, one of the things I like to do right around this part of the time, I lay out some 220 sandpaper with tape, and this is that real sticky masking tape that you never can use on paint jobs. Press it down real good. Make sure you're on a flat spot of the table. In fact, here it peeled up a little bit. Just press it down. And I want to check. What I'm going to do is take each one of these sides and get them where there's just a little bit. I can see just a little bit of sanding here before we lay out the formers. Now, one of the things, because these fuses are wider than Spitfire fuses, I want to try to use a few less formers. I can take advantage of the fact that I have more width than I had with the Spitfire. Spitfire was a real thin body. Now, the little gaps in between the pieces of sandpaper let the dust kind of like come out of it, similar to how the flutes work in a drill. And this is just to do a very little, make sure I have exactly a perfectly level, flat surface to work off. And of course I can do this to both sides so that the shells attach real nice. Now, I'm going to leave these papers on here while I put the formers in, because I want to go back after the formers are in and make sure I haven't put any twists or bows into the body. Now, in the past, one of the things that I've really spent a lot of time figuring out that things I could and could not do to fuselages to make them rigid and strong. One of the things, this former here, that's going to go from, well, the mounts are going to end here. This former here I've always tried to make, and any former that amounted to be part of the tank box up here. Instead of using, in the past, this former would look something like this. It would be made out of 1/8" plywood, and the idea is always, the mounts would be up here. The idea of using 1/8" plywood is you want to have rigidity in this dimension. This fuselage wants to twist. It wants to make these corners distort. Now, what I've done in the past, done with the Spitfire, Tsunami, other models, is make whatever shape this bulkhead has to be, but make out of laminated pieces of grain, at a 1/16 or 32nd even, where the grain is going like plywood, but the grain needs to go corner to corner. You need to, if you're going to try this as one of the things to lighten up your fuselage, get the grain corner to corner. I'm also, in this piece, I'm going to laminate in a little piece of carbon fiber going corner to corner somewhere in the lamination process. And what I want to do is make up these two bulkheads next, and then I'm going to get on with laying out the fuselage formers. This will be the first one that sets us up. The first thing I need to do is make sure I have a completely 90-degree edge on one side of this wood. If I don't, I can true it up. And what I want to do is just make myself, this is only going to be a template, because I want to be able to replicate this part. Using a triangle, use a T-square, use whatever you can. Cut it a little bit oversized to begin with. This is going to be P for pattern. Now, another side benefit is I'll pass all these patterns on to Bob Martin, so he'll have a very, very accurate set of templates for working up his plans for the Seafire. He's going to be on board, same as he was with the Spitfire. And the other thing, because obviously we're going to use molded shells, you don't want to have these fuselage different width. I want to mark this, so I have the height. I just want to take a 90-degree triangle. Whoops. Since this is just a pattern, it won't really matter. Make sure I don't have any gaps. Okay, now I can make this piece up. I want to have the grain corner to corner. What I've done in the past is use 32nd inch punk wood, really punk wood, with the grain corner to corner. I see this sheet isn't big enough. I got to join a couple of sheets together. What I have to do here, just put a seam in this, which will disappear later on. And this doesn't have to be all that fancy either, since we're going to put some carbon toe in here. In fact, we can use the seam to go corner to corner. Don't let it glue to the table. Now, one thing you don't want to do is cut out all the pieces and then try joining them, because each one will be just a little off. Easiest way is to take the first one that you've traced, in this case, this one here, use a straight edge and a 90-degree triangle, because again, we're trying to maintain all 90-degree angles. In fact, I can cut this whole piece down, that's why I laid it out. But all the grain going corner to corner, or this will not be a weight saving. It'll just be that you'll reduce the amount of weight, yeah, and you'll reduce the amount of strength too. So very carefully now. Now we're going to get down to nuts and bolts here. We want to, these are some of the little parts that allow, like the Spitfire, to come out at a reasonably light weight, and yet we haven't traded away the motor run, we haven't folded the wing or had the gear come out, or put some kind of nonsense controls in that halfway through a season the controls fail or the bell crank wears out or something. Again, 90 degrees on all the angles, very important. This is this first piece that's going to be our pattern, in effect our real pattern. And we want this to be, as we glue this up to new pieces, I want to work off all these edges. So I want to make sure everything is 90 to start with. Now when I lay this down on the next piece, all I need to line up is one edge. And I'm not too concerned with the other lines. It's just for my own reference, really. Cross grain, just the opposite on each piece. The grain goes in the opposite direction. It gets hot. See, now you actually use the edge of the piece, which we know fits the fuse perfectly. The edge, if you were to glue these ahead of time and get that off just a little bit, no good. Okay, now you see this is going in this corner, this one's going in this corner. Now we can flip-flop them. Now I want to get some carbon and put the carbon corner to corner. Again, the easiest way to get toe on, leave the piece a little bit longer. Again, this stuff is so expensive. If you need a little bit, I'll be glad to give it to you. You want to you lay out X amount of money for this. Okay. We also want to put this under a little bit of tension, because now the next piece of wood that's going to go on here, the corner is going to go in the opposite direction. Now this will be laminated in between the next piece of wood, and the grain will be opposite. Always keep the grain opposite. And always, when you use carbon fiber, confine it, laminate it in between two pieces of wood for the maximum strength. You can see how the carbon stays right in. You can see it where it's in the corner. I'm going to do the same thing again to the next piece and laminate another piece on. I'll have 5 layers. This will be 30-second, 5 layers, 4 pieces of carbon buried into the matrix. Okay, 1 piece is on there. Usually it's good to let 1 piece, just stuck to my finger. Let it dry, then put the other piece on. Okay, we're ready for the next lamination. Five laminations, 4 pieces of carbon, and this is a lot lighter than a piece of 1/8" plywood, and probably a lot stronger too. Just takes a little time to engineer it up. Now the last thing is to true up the edges. Make sure I have 90 degrees on every edge. Don't want to have something that's going to start off with the fuse being like a banana. This is just one kiss with the sandpaper here. Don't be afraid to spend a little time on alignment. Now I also, once I get that right, I want to soak, this is all end grain, soak the whole thing with thin CA. Each edge, just let it work in capillary action. Hit it with the paper towel. Now, last but not least, I want to make sure I have a 90-degree angle. I want to make sure I'm lined up well with the cutout in the wing. Scribe a little line on there. Make sure I'm lined up on this side. And while I have it all in alignment, make sure I have all 90-degree edges here. And then I'll tack it in place first. Just put a couple of dots of CA on this. Double check everything. This is just a little tack. Okay, it's tack glued in. Everything looks real good. Now I can run a bead down here. Get this in a semi-permanent state. Okay, now I'm going to get the other one done off camera, and then we can start laying out where the fuselage formers are going to go. So far that worked out real nice, and this has been a proven way. This is not some experimental way of doing things. This is a proven way of getting some of the weight out of the plane without losing the strength. Now one of the things I want to do, I want to lay this right over the plans. You can remember on a Spitfire we had quite a few formers. And I want to do the first one. I'm going to try to use every other former and see if I can lay this out with every other former in position here and just see how rigid it is before I go on. I want to lay this out. Of course, I'll draw the lines using a T-square off the top, but I'm going to try using every other one and see how that, if that's stiff enough. I won't know until it's all finished if it's going to be stiff enough, but if it isn't, I can just fill in between. That's the whole idea. I'm just laying out roughly where these would belong, but I can cut the formers, the length I can cut exactly using the plan, so I don't have to worry about that right now. I just want to get 90-degree lines on here. And I'm basically using every other one as a starting point, and I can eyeball in the second ones. That's what's nice about having a really well done set of plans. Now off the plans I can measure the height of the formers, and they're all basically going to be the same on this fuselage. I'm not going to have a lot of taper top to bottom because we want to leave the top open for the push rod. So the first thing is I'll strip off a piece of this wood. I think I may as well strip extra up. I'm going to have to do 2 of these. And this is 16th, contest 16th punked out wood, but it is sea grain. Now I may be able to get all the formers out of this one piece since it's a 4-inch piece. Again, I want to use all 90-degree angles. So the whole trick here is keep the triangle or the T-square on every piece. Now I'll start here just by laying these out inside the fuse. See if we could get this one. No. Now I have to take into account that little triangle piece, but I can do that. Now the best thing to always do is just tack a few of them in randomly. In fact, I'm going to try to tack maybe every 3rd or 4th one in to keep that curve, and then fill in. If you start at one end and work to the other end, you always wind up with a Coke bottle. Now this one is just tacked in there. I can see that I haven't distorted anything. Now what I like to do each time I put a former in, I guess you can sight this, is make sure you're not making a bow. Make sure you're not making a snake, a banana, or a bow, or whatever. And if you see one is, let's say it goes out here, and then just break the former out. That's why they're all just tacked in. Break it out, a couple of shots with the sandpaper, make sure it's 90 degrees. Now, next step, I'm going to get a couple of them up here. Now, the ones up here are going to all come out when we put the wing in. They're just there so when we carve the blocks and handle it, it doesn't get too delicate. But it looks like, now what I've used is thicker wood. Of course, on the Spitfire, I use thinner wood and punkier wood. This is really 16th sea grain, and you can see I've used every other one. But see what you gain and lose is you get, if you try to leave out too many, what happens, this turns into a starving horse, and when you look at it in the sunlight, you get that bow and belly, and that's one of the things the old Spitfire does not have. It has perfectly smooth flat sides that are really, really nice. So I'm just, and again, the reason I'm doing this trying to interpolate just how many formers I can get away with here, not for the idea of any other reason, but just making this that I don't have the starving horse look, and how few can I use. I know I can use the amount that's on the plans, and if I have to, obviously I can fill in the gaps and I'll have exactly what's on the plans. But this is one way I can try to do a little cheating without cheating, and if it doesn't work, I can go right back. I haven't lost one single minute. Now, of course, you don't know this until you try it. It looks like what I did, I started off by putting every 4th former in. Now what I want to do is I want to put in every one in between. And at that point in time, I'll try to make a decision. Now remember, the reason I'm able to do this is this fuse is wider. I also have the 19-inch tail moment instead of an 18-inch tail moment to deal with, so I really want to make this fuse rigid. So I'm going to try now that I've got all these in, and I can sight down it, and I'm pretty comfortable with the idea I've got a good, nice curve to it. Now, filling in the gaps is relatively easy, and you just want to make sure you don't spring it or put a Coke bottle shape in it. Now a lot of times it's easier to make the formers oversized and then use a machinist rule. In this case, the ones up in the front don't have the notches, so they're basically just rectangles. It's a real convenient way of getting them on there. Okay, we're just filling in. We got a couple more to do here, and this fuse will be ready. These actually go faster than you expect. Once you get the little technique down, you can trim off the tops, a couple swipes of the sandpaper when they're oversized, and most of all, maintaining that integrity. That's the most important thing. It's so much better to do it this way than if you start at one end and work to the other end. This is definitely a tip worth its weight in gold. And what I've been waiting all afternoon to find out here is once I have these formers in, and I wound up with every other one in, I wanted to grab it from the back of the wing to the beginning of the stab and see how stiff this is, and it feels fine. Now maybe it's because these fuse sides are a little stiffer. I don't know, but it looks like we may be able to get away with just having every other former in there. I'm going to go with this. Unless I see the formers starting to do that, and then maybe I'd connect them with X members. But always trying, and it's a constant battle to decide if it's light and taking the things out that you really don't need to have. Now, it may be that we could have gotten away with less formers on a Spitfire, I don't know. But this feels fine. This feels pretty rigid. And I think we're going to give this a shot. Now, I got the other body. Where's the other body? I'll do the other one off camera. It's getting late here already. This might be the end of the day, in fact. Where's my watch? In fact, this is the end of the day. And we'll pick this up working on this a little bit tomorrow. Now tonight what I want to do is replicate the formers from fuse number 1 into fuse number 2. In fact, one of the things I'm going to do is lay the two fuses side by side, trace off all the former locations, and then I want to go back in here and make sure I have a good glue joint. These are all in there just tack glued in. Get permanent glue in this one, and this one turned out nice and rigid. Oh yeah, that'll be fine. So anyway, we're on the learning curve. We're trying to make each model a little bit different, a little bit better. Improve the breed, so to speak, which is exactly how the real Seafire Spitfires evolved. Okay, I'm going to get the former locations in this one. I guess I can do most of this off camera. We just want to replicate this one into this. And then most of all, I'm just trying not to get too far ahead of myself, make sure that they're exactly the same. In fact, I'll check this from time to time because we're going to use molded parts. I may even be able to use the mold from the Spitfire and just add a little piece to it. Anyway, more on that later. I want to make sure both of these, when I put them top to top and bottom to bottom, they're the same. And I'll do that as I start to fit the formers in. I'll just check it randomly and make sure I haven't made one wider, one thinner than the other. Now after putting one in, I decided what a good way to do this is, and maybe some way you can use this. I measured this former exactly, replicated this former into this location, so that from that point on anyway, now what I'll do is I'll pick this former up and spread this, and maybe every third one here, just to get the curve pretty much the same, because again, what I'm trying to do is make mirror images so the molded blocks fit right on top equally. And one of the things you're going to want to do is if you want to build a Seafire and you use my molds or may have me make molded parts, they've got to fit onto your fuse. You can't have it radically different. Oh, President Nixon. Okay, now as I get the last couple in, I really want to check that I'm not making one wider or narrower than the other. So far it's gone pretty quick, pretty simple. Always leave the dust on before you put it in. The dust helps kick it off. Now I want to take a little break from our project and show this is Walt Prey from preliminary pictures. Plane is not finished, and these are not super clear pictures, so he's asked me not to send them on to Stunt News. Notice the nice lettering, I'll always Walt Pray. Everything neat. Look at the nice little logo on the outboard wing. Now this is Walt's other plane. One is the Gunslinger and one is the Outlaw. As always, perfect paintwork, beautiful. Don't know what else to say. Again, Walt Pray work. Notice the nose, beautiful. Scoops, the paintwork, absolutely flawless. Okay, I want to thank Walt Pray for sharing these with us. Look forward to seeing him, and hey, I'm sure he'll have clearer pictures in Stunt News. He's sent them on. Beautiful planes, as always. Walt Pray. Now the next part of this that I want to make up is because this is a wide body, I'm going to have to shim the tank in from one side. I want to make up a little shim so that the tank will stay centered. So I can take a little reading here and see how much material I have to work with. Now I always try to make it that I can shim the tank up and down at least 1/8 of an inch. So the tank box then becomes wider by a little bit and higher and lower by a little bit, so I have a lot of room. I can manipulate the tank around to get the motor run fine-tuned. Okay, I'm going to make one piece for each side. I just want to get the length right here. I want this to come. Actually, I can steal it right off. I can take it right off the Spitfire plane. But I can take the length of this floor right off of this. And what I'm making is the side piece that's really a doubler here. Now I'm just framing out this piece so it'll in effect be a hollow tank side shim. This then becomes one of the side shims. I'll make this up, I'll replicate it onto this other piece, and then I'll have it glued in position so this will actually be hollow. Because this fuse is wider, there's no point in putting a whole piece of wood in here when I can put this is just going to hold the tank in from each side. Notice I have the grain going straight up and down, so it adds the most rigidity to this. Definitely want to have the grain going straight up and down. Now with the two little pieces made, what I want to do is marry them up to make sure they're exactly the same. I don't want to have this cocked off to one side or the other. By holding them together, that's a good way to make sure you get a nice straight angle on them. Now you can see this one, I chamfered down all the angles at a 45 just to even get a little more weight out of here. This one has to be done yet. I'll dress this all off and these are ready to install in. Now before I glue the second one in, I want to make sure I have plenty of clearance and that they're both perfectly even. And of course that I have just enough clearance that I can get the tank out. Now I have a pattern made up. Made this little pattern off camera. That's going to be for the floor here. I made it a little undersized. And of course what this is going to do is tie the fuse sides together, so I want to get exactly the same dimension front to back. This is just a pattern. I made it a 16th ball, so I'm going to put one piece, 3 pieces of 16th. The first piece, the grain will go this way, one piece 30 degrees this way, one piece 30 degrees that way, so we'll have 3 plies of 16th on that tank floor. I think that's shown, I'm not even sure that that's shown on the plans too. Now the same way we made up the other bulkheads, I've glued this right in place. I'm trying to get a 30-degree angle, 30-degree geodetic angle for the tank floor. Okay, the last little corner piece is going in now. Then that tank shim, I'll get all the edges trued up and I'll be ready to place right in position. Now once I get that box finalized, and of course I want to make sure the tank fits in and out. The bolts are in the way now, but I checked it with the bolts out. Once that's done, this is a trick worth its weight in gold, is I want to drip thin CA down all 4 corners into the back of the tank. So it actually rides its way right down into the back. That'll fuel proof the inside of the back of the tank somewhat and make for a real good joint. And then just roll it around from corner to corner, corner to corner, till I get all the corners caught. You can actually see it run from corner to corner, corner to corner. Yeah, it was a busy night. Okay, now I just want to check that I can get this in and out. No problem. In fact, it goes right on the floor. Now once I put the nose ring on here, the nose ring is going to be the front cowl mount. I need to grind some of this away, just enough that I can drop that tank right in. And when we're working off a 6-ounce tank, probably going to wind up with a 5.5, but I want to be able to get a 6 in and out just in case. Now some of that is going to have to get, in fact it's on the plans. I don't know why I just don't look at the plans. Even though this is wider, you see, this is the distance it's wider than the Spitfire. This is hopefully going to be a lot more scale-like when all the blocks are on and the molds. Now each time I take the bolts in and out, I put a drop or 2 of WD-40 on just to keep the threads in the blind nuts from getting glocked up with glue and dope and whatever. And this set of bolts will stay with the plane for the whole life of the plane. And at this point I like to sight down here, and I notice there's one former, I think it's this one here, that had a little bit of a belly in it. So what I did, you just break the former out, and you can see it's nice and loose now. Let the fuse side set to where it wants to be. Hit it with a drop of thick CA. And actually the thick CA will fill the gap, and that should return to being just a perfect curve. Now obviously another thing, if you had one that was bowed out, you could just cut it with a Zona saw, kind of fudge it in just to where it should be. Fill it up with thick CA, but you want to maintain that curve, no matter what. Now once you're totally satisfied that you've got the curves blended in nicely, now this is ready to make the glue joints permanent. And what I do is I hold it on a 45-degree angle. In fact, I see one here that shouldn't be. And just run right down the whole thing, get about 3 or 4 done at a time, and then wipe them with a Q-tip. That dust from the Q-tip will help kick it. Go down 2 or 3. And I'll just go down both sides of the fuselage, flip it over, and do the top joints. Get them all permanently joined, true it up, and we'll be ready for the next step tomorrow. The last thing I want to do is just true the edge. Any high spots will come right off. Now all that's left here in the next session, I guess I'll do it off camera, is replicate this onto the other fuse, so I have two of them. Okay, both of these are done now. Actually, this has been a long day's work. Now, it doesn't really matter if you're only making one plane at a time, but just get the idea. Everything on these, because we're going to use the molds, everything is really, I guess, within 1/64 of an inch. Not too bad, not too shabby, Ertnowski. All right, that's it. This has been a long day, and we'll see you tomorrow morning. Okay, I don't know if I put this on the tape before. This is from Pat Johnson, and he's really gotten excited about our little project. He looked this up in one of his aviation manuals and made me some photocopies. It also has the history of the plane, which I wasn't aware of. Some of what I wasn't aware of is they actually used these right up until and including the Korean conflict. So more information on the Seafire coming. Pat becomes the first one to make a major contribution to the Seafire program as far as documentation goes. I'm sure there'll be others. Now today, what I was just thinking, I had come up with a brilliant idea. I don't know if it's going to work though. I have the mold that I had for the bottom block. This is the Spitfire bottom block. And this fuselage, of course, is considerably wider. So I'm just looking at this to try to figure something out. And I was thinking maybe I could use this same mold. Kind of unrealistic. What I was thinking maybe I could use this mold for is I could just wrap a piece up in the front like this, like a shim. In fact, let's take one of these out. One of these to shim the mold so that I could avoid having to carve another mold. I guess we're not going to be able to do that though. This doesn't really look like it has the right contour or anything. And then I took the mold that was the top. See, this is what's nice about having all these molds. Once you have a mold, you can use it for other things too. So kind of pays to make the molds. But I have the mold that is the top block to John DeTavio's plane, and that's almost a perfect fit. So maybe what I'm going to do here, I don't know if I'm really going to be able to do this. This was not part of the original plan, but I want to give it a try. President Nixon wanting to know about molding technology. Let me get the phone. We're going to do a lot of molding work later, and I thought possibly one of the things I'd be able to do here, I guess I got a little carried away. I looked at this about 15 different ways of trying to see, you see the contour of the body? It's just a little different in the front. And I certainly don't want to compromise it. I was hoping I could just have, and it's a little bit different on the length. I was hoping what I could do, and this is probably something you can do in different applications. See, the curve is, see that little, like it's a different width. Now keep in mind, the Seafire body is a whole lot different than the Spitfire. It's wider, it's thicker, it's got the bubble canopy, a different rudder, different distribution of side area, longer tail moment arm, 19-inch instead of 18-inch. So, and should be a lot more scale. So it looks like one of the things I better resign myself to right now is put all these blocks away, get out a piece of balsa that's going to be big enough. And this does not have to be a good piece of wood, by the way. I can use up what amounts to be scrap wood and make myself up a mold for the bottom block. And the way I want to start this is I want to make the mold for the bottom block, continue up, make the block for the cowling, get the nose ring first, get the cowling in, then flip this over, and at which point in time, when I have this up on this side, now when I do the carving of the top block, and that'll be a whole different mold, then what I want to have is I want to see the final look of the plane. I want to be able to put it next to the Spitfire over there and look back and forth and say, yeah, because I really think the profile of the Spitfire really presents real well, has the right side area distribution, and I want to replicate that onto this plane, which should be a lot more scale, without, again, you know, this is what you hope, without trading away any of the performance at all, or making it way too heavy, or what we're looking for is not only that it's easier to build it, once I have these molds made, the next guy that builds a Seafire, hey, send me the molds. Boop, done. You don't have to go buy any of those heavy blocks and carve them and all that stuff. This really is not too time consuming. So I'm going to look around for a piece of wood, doesn't have to be good, and get this set up to carve the bottom block mold. Okay, now what I did, I found a block that it's really not the right block, and it's kind of heavy wood, but then this is the beauty of molding, is you don't need a great block. And of course it's not long enough, but when you're making a mold, you can put a joint in a block. So what I'll do is look through my scrap, get another piece for the back. I trace this out so that I can make all the cuts. I want to cut this down to get most of the wood off before I start carving. No, I just want to get this block tacked down. I really don't have a lot of time to do this today. If I can get the block tacked down, maybe get some of the roughing done. Before George gets here, I'll be all set. See, this is what I've still been doing. I'm still fighting this thing of having to not be able to work full time, but I'm getting in a lot of little sessions, and I'm starting to it's starting to look like an airplane, so getting a little excited about it. I just tack this on about every 2 inches, and I'll make up that little piece for the back. This is why it always pays to save all your little scraps. You can always use a little piece like this for the tail piece. I'm trying to do, I'm just hitting this with the belt sander until I can get a nice, reasonably nice joint. I don't want to carve through and have a ripple there if I can help it. Get a halfway decent joint anyway. And I'm trying to get thick CA on a whole end grain so this will stay in place. Again, this is not going to be a finished part. This is going to be a mold, so you hope that that joint eventually will disappear in the final construction. However, I would like to make it, as nice as possible, so that, we may make several, I'm sure we're going to make several other pieces off of this mold. And just tacking it on, that's all I have to do at this point. And I'll probably have enough time to do some of the roughing out. Usually what I like to do is do it all in one shot, but because of time constraints, we're supposed to go get a load of rocks today from the quarry, and they're going to close the quarry, so I want to make sure I get them before the season's out for my pond. Now, before I do any kind of carving, and this is a good tip, any kind of carving, you want to get a pad on the table, some kind of foam pad. In this case, I got what was our good bed blanket at one time. I guess it isn't anymore. Sorry, Karen. Anyway, I want to get the table covered. This keeps you from getting everything gouged up during a carving thing. Also, all the chips can fall onto the blanket. And since I haven't raked the leaves yet this year, I can take them outside and just chuck them in a leaf pile, and the town will come and pick them up. Now, no matter how sharp these blades are, I always like to start off every time I carve something with a brand new blade. I also want to take some masking tape before I start carving and go along the edge of the fuselage here, just so I don't carve down into the fuse side. So let me get the tape. Now, the whole idea of the tape is just so in case you slip with the knife, you don't run up and gouge up that nice fuse side. You like not to do that, of course. This just gives it a little protection. Especially when we're carving a mold, because we really don't want to vary this. I don't want to go into the fuse side any more than I have to. I don't want to lose material from the fuse side if possible. Now normally when I'm making a mold, I want to ultimately have it undersized. This is going to have a taper, and I can tell you a problem you run into if you do a top block or a bottom block, and as you taper this, as it gets to the back of the fuse, it tapers, but you don't taper it this way. You wind up with a very funny curve where it tries to sandwich in at the last end. So the first thing I want to do, before I even start carving this, is I want to get some of this material off of here so I avoid that syndrome, whatever that syndrome really is. Since I don't know the final shape of this, but I know roughly I have to have some taper in here, I'm just going to hack off some of the big material first. You know, you could do this on a saw. It's convenient. For this kind of wood, this is not really good wood, so it doesn't really matter. I'm not trying to make a, you know, the world's record on carving it out or anything. I can just lop off some of the big pieces, just keep going back and forth. Eventually you'll have a chunk of it off. Then I can round off the corners. There we go. You can get some of the big pieces off in one shot. Again, a brand new number 26 blade is the way to go. Carving is like a motor skill. It's like anything else. You just, if you do enough of it, you'll get good, you'll get fast. Just do a lot of it. And the whole idea of this is that we wind up with this molded part. It's going to be identical to the other fuse, and we won't have to buy 2 or 3 or 4 more of these blocks. Now you certainly can get all the big corners off with a 26 blade, and then we'll try to use the plane at some point in time to do the final shaving. Again, a new blade and a plane is a good idea. Right about now is a good time to make sure you have an extra blade, a brand new blade. And if you're in doubt, go slow, take it easy, because if you go too far, you're pretty much going to resign yourself to carving up another block. Another kind of good idea is to try to knock both sides off equally if you can. Once you get the big corners off, then we can start using the plane. And I'm going to try, when I get up to the angle of the fuse side, not to go into that tape. Just take tiny shavings. Don't go up into the fuse side. This is where the blanket is helpful, because you don't wind up banging and beating all little dents into it. As I'm going along, I try to look from the front so I get about the same amount off each side. Again, the only purpose of this is to get big amounts off in a very short amount of time. Then we can get right into using a plane. Now I'm being real careful when I get up by that tape. I don't want to go gouging into the tape. Just small slivers, knife on about a 45-degree angle, and just shaving in. I'm trying to exaggerate the motion here so you can see what I'm doing. I'm not holding it and then waiting for the knife to go in. Little slivers, like I'm spooning it out, like spooning Jello. As soon as I can feel a tape. Now I can feel a tape there. That's about as far as I can go. And the closer you get to the final shape that you want, the more you want to have. Just take tiny, tiny slivers. Don't take a whole bunch at once. Once you go into that fuse side, you've got a big repair. And it's one more thing you have to do that's going to be work instead of productive energy. It's just going to be work, and you're done doing the repair, and it isn't any better than if you didn't have to repair it in the first place. Nice small shavings, and I just move it up. A little technique. See how I'm holding the knife? Now I found this real helpful. If you hold a knife like this, the blade tends to gouge in. You tend to slide right in. Your thumb is kind of like the controlling factor here. Again, no matter what airplane you decide to build, actually what modeling endeavor you're in, the eye-hand coordination of carving is an important skill. Now you can see it goes pretty fast once you have the big edges off. It goes real fast, in fact. I remember we were doing a fuse construction video. Dave was back behind my garage buried in chips and just couldn't seem to make any kind of speed. Now I know he carves and it's a zip boom bang thing. It's not a, he's going to be here in a week or two, work on his new model. We'll see if his carving skills have improved since the last time we had a session. And of course, right up by the nose is I really want to make sure I get all the contours right. The object is I don't want to thin out the fuse side. Now I've seen some people when they round this block, this fuse side almost becomes a 64th inch. Well, we don't want to have that either. I want some integrity in that nose. Let's assume this plane is going to last, you know, the minimum of my lifetime. I want to be able to even hand it over to somebody and say, hey, who knows, maybe, you know, X amount of years from now you'll be looking at this video and say, hey, look at that. Look at that model lasted and withstood the test of time. That'll be an important thing. I would hate to think you put all this effort and love and attention into a model and a year later it's a piece of junk, you know. We're going for the long haul here. This is not short-term gain. Everything on this will be hopefully the long term. Now, most of the carving from this point on I do by hand. I do it with the plane. I gotta get the plane out. Make sure I have a new blade in it. If you don't have one of these, it's a master ass screw plane. There's really no trick to using this. Set the blade at a nice low depth. Hold it on a little bit of an angle. In fact, this blade is at too much of an angle already. I don't want to start taking big chunks at it. And what it does, it takes the high spots off. It'll give you a nice even contour. It's a nice friendly tool to use. And it ties in, it gets all the straight angles on for you. Let me get this on a close-up. Maybe you can see this on a close-up better. Now, if you never used one of these guys, you're in for a treat. The trick is to try to get off nice big shavings. Once you get the, yeah, actually you probably could use this for roughing too, but I just find it more convenient to do the roughing with the 26 blade. Leave the last little bit, don't go up near the tape or you wind up, this for sure will go into the tape. But see, what that allows you to do is get a nice contour. Then of course the final little bit you have to do with sandpaper, but this lets you get a whole lot of it done real conveniently and easily. You got to keep cleaning it. Now you always want to go away from the grain if possible. In other words, I'd really like to, I can't really do it. I'd like to always be going downhill away from the grain, but that's not possible. It's not possible all the time here. Since we have multiple curves, you're always kind of fighting the grain. This is real handy for making wheel pants, cowlings, blocks, molds. Probably the best $3 tool in the shop. And again, I try to do it all by hand. Feel it, don't look at it. When you feel it, you'll feel a high spot. You look at it, even with good eyes, and I don't even have good eyes, it's hard to see high spots, ripples, ridges, but your hand doesn't lie. Your hand, oh, there's a spot right there. Your hand will always show you where there's a high spot. And once you get the surface relatively smooth, the shavings come right off. In the beginning, because you're hitting high spots, it's kind of rough. But once you get to the final cuts are just like paper. Okay, the final contour I want to get on here with a sanding block with about 100 grit paper. She's ready to be sanded out when I get back, and it looks like it's turning out to be a good day to run down a quarry here. Not that it matters. I'll try to get some work on this tonight. Next thing will be to block sand this all out and then do the undersizing of it, and that's the part that makes the mold super accurate. And then of course what we want to be able to do is try to mold itself on both fuses, make sure and they are within a piece of a paper of being different. So when we do start molding parts up, and probably that'll be on the next tape, we'll be able to make multiples. And of course, if you're making a Seafire, you can just say, hey Wendy, I want the bottom block, here's $1,000, boom, 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 done. This is also real good if you're making a mold for a tune pipe bottom of a plane, because you're going to cut the whole thing away anyway. You only wind up with a shell of an eggshell. This is a good way to do it. Little project for today, lettering up Don's, putting some little trim on Don's Predator. Want to make some little outlines around the lettering, and then we want to fill in here with an extra coat of clear. Just to build up now, these are those press-on letters, and they're a little bit higher than the paint around it, so the clear is not holding on to them real good. This will help. Then we can put the clear back over this little area. This will be a nice little repair. Now anytime I do this kind of a touch-up, and this is over a plane that's already painted, I always suggest you leave the tape on at least 24 hours, peel it back real carefully, and what we're going to try to do the next time Don comes over is mask just this area off where the lettering is, and then put some ink lines and clear in there. Now we ran into a little problem today. All my ink pens are out on loan. I don't know where the hell. We found out that Ken from Clifton has them, but he'll bring them back later. We're going to have to finish this in the next time Don gets to come over here. Got some nice pictures from Juan Carlos, one of the guys from that were here from Puerto Rico. This is his Magnum Super Tiger 60. Remember I told you about the tank vents being on the wrong side. The vents should be on the inside. Give you a little critique here. Remember too, the rubber ducky kills the power. Little things. I'm sure he's a good learner. All these guys from Puerto Rico, if you haven't seen the tape, that we have a whole tape of the Great Puerto Rican Adventure, all the guys that came up here from Puerto Rico, we made a special tape out of it. Give me a holler. It was really a good tape, and we really had a lot of fun with these guys. This is his other plane, an RD-1. It looks like a real nice paint job. Now the thing that all these guys had, and I'll just repeat it again, they all had really nice finishes, but they were all heavy. And this is one of the things, I'm going to send him a nice note, one of the things he has to work on. Nice finishes, but also keep it light. Now one of the things, I'm going to send these guys a copy of this tape, one of the things these guys got to learn is, they were up here and they were criticizing my opera music and my Bing Crosby music. So here's the deal, Juan, here's the deal, send me Puerto Rican music, we'll put some Puerto Rican music on the videos. Now, I mean you, no, don't look at the other guy, you. Anyway, good. Thanks a lot for the pictures, I'll send them on to Stunt News. Okay, now what I did, I padded up the table with even more blankets because I want everything to be nice and soft here from this point on, or actually I should have done this a little earlier even. I want to take out some 100 grit sandpaper. This is aluminum oxide paper. It does a nice rough cutting job. I've got all the shaping done in the last session, so I want to kind of get this smooth with the sandpaper, and I'll do that over by the vacuum machine. But I'm going to try not to go up into the tape. Then I'm going to pop the block and downsize it about 3/32 of an inch. And that's so that the mold will have that final little curve in there. This way I keep the thickness of the fuselage reasonable, and I can get that curve to blend in real nice. Otherwise, you wind up with kind of a point here. See, this is what's nice about having done this several times now, and we made all the molds for the Spitfire. We have a little bit of a headlock on exactly how to do it. We'll set the wire in, and I'll go through this all again. This is an excellent way. You want to make your plane lighter and cheaper and easier to make and be able to duplicate it. Molding the blocks is definitely a must. Now from this point on, actually just knocking this down with 100 grit paper is not a big deal. But remember, I'm trying not to go into the tape. I don't want to lose any of that thickness. And if you've never done molded blocks before, I'm sure some of the new people haven't seen the Spitfire tapes that have a lot of this molding operations on it. Last year we spent pretty much the whole season trying to develop a technology for molding this stuff that would be easy to do, inexpensive, reasonable, quick, cheap, whatever you want to call it. And I think we were real successful at that. The planes came out a lot lighter. And the whole point is, and I guess this is a point I should not fail to mention, the point is now if I pop this block and I have to hollow it, by the time I hollow it, I can finish the mold and mold a piece, probably mold 2 or 3 pieces, in the time it would take to hollow this block out. So it's really cost effective, time effective, in every way it's effective. And it's real nice, of course, at this point if you have a vacuum bench. If you don't, you know, work outside, I guess is the best. Or use a shop vac, but this vacuuming bench really makes working nice. Again, I'll finish this up with 100, this is 100 grit, and then I'll finish it up with maybe some 220, get a nice smooth surface on it, and then I need to undersize it. Oh, this is 60, this is even rougher, I didn't even notice that. Not really a critical thing though, just to get it roughed out. We'll put the final sanding on with some 320 too. And of course, you want to use a block. From this point on, a block for everything. This way you get the nice smooth contours. You won't get highs and lows, bellies, mountaintops. And what I'm trying to do also is in the front here, I want to curve this up into the cowling area. Get all these curves to start flowing up. I want to try to bring some of this up around, not go back and forth constantly or you wind up with a little bit of an octagon. So some of the sanding I want to do in this dimension. Now I like to finish up the final contour with the block. This picks up all the high spots. And of course it pays to take enough time to make the mold perfect, because you're going to make, you might be able to use this on your next shift too. You won't have to make a mold but maybe once or twice and you're finished. You can use it over and over again and whatever. If you're going to build the same plane over and over, it definitely pays to make the mold. And the bonus of that is they'll all be exactly the same. Okay, after a really good final sanding, this is ready to pop off. I'll get a brand new razor blade, pop it right off. Then I need to undersize it. Now I just want to true this all up. There's always some little dots of wood that stay on here. You see the little pieces? Get a true edge before I go on to the next step. And I can also true up the bottom of the fuse that I just used. And getting a tape off can be a pain in the neck now too. Now I'm going to try to do the first sheets, the test sheet anyway, for this mold with 3/32. So what I want to do is roughly get off 3/32 of an inch of material. And this just, if you notice how I use my finger as a guide, walk down the whole piece of wood roughly 3/32 of an inch. And then we're going to undersize this by 3/32 of an inch, so that'll allow the mold to come right into position. Now, if you notice, this is a key part of making a mold. I'm only going to take this amount off. I'm not going to try to take an even amount off the whole thing, because I found out in the past, and this is what came of the Spitfire project, once this piece is molded and you take it off the mold, in time it kind of shrinks back to right back to its original shape. So I'm just going to take, to start with, a little bit off. I use these as a guideline, and then of course I'll recontour and resand this whole thing, and this will then be mounted on a plate. In fact, I think we're going to probably have to do this on the next video, but I'll let this one run out, get this piece made, and once you can pick up rough idea of roughly how much of this has to come off, you've got a lifetime of pleasant molding ahead of you. It's a very, very nice technique, and I'm amazed that in years gone by that even I didn't know how efficient and effective this was. Once you do this and go through this cycle once, I doubt you would ever want to carve another block. A plane is a good, easy way to get this off in a hurry. Work right up to the line. Contour the last little bit in with sandpaper. Now you can see the rough cut of about how much you can picture. That's where the sheeting wants to drop right down. But now from this point on, what I want to do is pick that curve up, so that the sheeting, even though it'll be bigger here, it'll kind of drop right into position on the first shot. And if you make the mold a little bit too small, you can either use masking tape to cover it. You could actually put a piece of 30-second sheet in there. There's a lot of ways you can vary the thickness. But getting this contour right in here seems to be the most important part of it. Now I'm going to have to pick this up on the next tape. We're at the end of this tape. But the next piece of this is going to be obviously to bring that curve back in. And notice I have the same amount sticking out on each side. That's kind of the key. And in the final little shaping, we're going to pick this up on the next tape. I don't want to be in the middle of this when it runs out of tape. I'll run a few photos at the end of this and just hope you pick some good information up on this. But we will be finishing this mold and molding pieces probably by the end of the day. We'll have some molded pieces. Now, I just thought of a great idea, you know. I'm going to be making the cannons. I already ordered the stuff to make the cannons. Going to be making cannons, but could you imagine an appearance judging? You reach over, pull a pin or whatever, and click, the wings go up. The other thing you could do is, and I just thought of this, I want to talk to Joe about this, maybe making wingtips that are removable, and you could replace the whole wingtip. Instead of having a tip weight box, have the whole wingtip removable, the outboard wingtip, so that you could simulate this. I don't know. You know I'm losing my mind. Hey, bear along with me. We're going to be making a hell of a Seafire here. I hope you enjoy being part of this action, being part of this little crazy world that I live in. And boy, when you look at the Seafire as an aeroplane to model, there are just so many options. By the way, one of the next things we're going to do on the next tape is dope out what we're actually going to do about a spinner and about this nose section. See how these contours all kind of fade in? And the late model one doesn't even have a scoop underneath, Joe, so keep that in mind. Anyway, a lot of choices when you're doing a Seafire. Seafire is a really interesting plane to model.